The great hall of Nexus Prime buzzed with voices from 1,000 different worlds. Representatives from across the galaxy filled the curved rows of seats, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors, sizes, and shapes. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some stood on 4 legs, others floated in special tanks. But today, they all shared one common purpose. Ambassador Doyun sat alone in the human section, a small area that looked almost empty compared to the massive delegations. Surrounding him, his dark suit was simple and plain next to the elaborate robes and armor worn by other ambassadors. He held a basic tablet in his hands. Taking notes as speaker after speaker rose to address the assembly, Chancellor Grex stood at the central podium, his tall Vorthak frame casting long shadows under the bright lights. His skin was pale blue, and his forearms moved in grand gestures as he spoke. His voice carried easily through the translation systems that filled every seat. "Fellow beings of the galaxy," Grex began, his words translated instantly into hundreds of languages. "We face a grave threat to our peaceful existence. For too long, we have allowed one species to spread unchecked through our territories. We have watched as they insert themselves into every aspect of our lives, our governments, our militaries." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the hall. Many heads nodded, and several representatives made sounds of approval in their native tongues. "The humans," Grex continued, "claim to come in peace. They offer help, knowledge, and friendship. But look at the facts. In just 300 years since first contact, they have established colonies in over 2,000 systems. They serve as advisors to our militaries, doctors in our hospitals, engineers in our most sensitive facilities." Admiral Thrain of the Kelani rose from his seat, his massive form covered in ceremonial battle armor. The Kelani were warriors by nature, and Thrain was their greatest general. His voice was deep and threatening. "The Chancellor speaks truth," Thrain announced. "These humans adapt too quickly. They learn our weaknesses, study our defenses. My homeworld, human technicians maintain our greatest warships. They know every circuit, every weapon system. Is this not dangerous?" More voices joined in agreement. The Threnal representative, a spider-like being with multiple eyes, clicked his approval. The Zelthari delegation whispered among themselves, their snake-like heads bobbing in agreement. Dayan continued writing on his tablet, his face showing no emotion. He had heard these arguments before, in smaller meetings and private conversations. Today was simply the day they became official. "We do not speak of hatred," Grex said, raising his hands for silence. "We speak of caution. These humans are not evil, but they are unpredictable. They think differently than we do. They take risks that make us uncomfortable. They ask questions that perhaps should not be asked." A small voice spoke from the back of the hall. Ambassador Jiwoo of the Pilari stood on her chair, her tiny frame barely visible among the giants around her. The Pilari were one of the smallest species in the galaxy, but they were known for their honesty. "What crimes have the humans committed?" she asked. "What laws have they broken? Where is the evidence of this threat you describe?" The hall fell silent for a moment. Chancellor Grex's face showed irritation at the interruption. "The threat is not in what they have done," he replied. "The threat is in what they might do. Their expansion is too rapid. Their integration into our societies is too complete. We must act before it is too late." "But what about the hospitals they have built?" Jiwoo continued. "The trade routes they have established? The peace treaties they have helped negotiate? Are we to ignore all the good they have done?" Admiral Thrain stood again, his armor clanking as he moved. "Good deeds can hide dangerous intentions. A warrior knows that the enemy who comes with gifts is often the most dangerous of all." The debate continued for hours. Speaker after speaker rose to voice their concerns about human expansion, human influence, human unpredictability. Some spoke of economic competition. Others worried about cultural contamination. A few mentioned the humans' unusual ability to form friendships across species lines, calling it suspicious. Through it all, Doyan sat quietly. He took notes, but he did not try to defend his species. He did not interrupt or argue. When other ambassadors looked his way, he simply nodded politely and returned to his writing. Finally, Chancellor Grex called for the formal vote. The resolution appeared on screens throughout the hall in hundreds of languages. Resolution 847 Alpha, the Human Containment Protocol. The terms were simple but devastating. Humans would be restricted to their current star systems. No new colonies would be permitted. Human military vessels would be banned from neutral space. Trade with human worlds would be limited to essential goods only. Human citizens working in sensitive positions throughout the galaxy would be required to return to human space within one standard year. The vote began with the largest delegations. The Vorthak voted yes, all 400 of their representatives, raising their hands in unison. The Kelani Military Council voted yes with fierce pride. The Threnal Consortium voted yes, already calculating the profits they would gain from reduced human competition, one by one. The species of the galaxy voted to isolate humanity. Some voted with enthusiasm, others with reluctance, but they voted. Nonetheless, the Zelthari voted yes. The Hegemony of Seven Suns voted yes. The Crystal Mines voted yes. When the Pilari delegation's turn came, Ambassador Jiwu stood on her chair once more. The Pilari abstained from this vote, she announced. We cannot support a resolution based on fear rather than facts. A few other small species followed her lead, but their numbers were tiny compared to the great powers of the galaxy. The final tally appeared on the screens. 847 votes in favor, 1 vote against from a minor species that few had heard of, and 23 abstentions, mostly from the smallest delegations. Chancellor Grex smiled as he read the results. The resolution passes. The Human Containment Protocol is now galactic law. The hall erupted in cheers from some sections, worried murmurs from others. Many representatives began discussing what this would mean for their own worlds. Their own people. Through all the noise and celebration, Ambassador Doyun calmly closed his tablet and stood up. The movement was so quiet that at first no one noticed, but gradually the hall began to fall silent as beings turned to watch the lone human representative. He walked down the steps toward the central floor, his footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. When he reached the speaker's podium, he looked up at the hundreds of faces watching him. Some expected anger. Others anticipated threats or pleas for mercy. Instead, Doyun's voice was calm and professional when he spoke. The Terran Federation acknowledges this decision. That was all. No arguments, no protests, no emotional outbursts. Just a simple statement of fact. He gathered his few belongings, nodded politely to Chancellor Grex, and walked toward the exit. The great doors of the assembly hall opened automatically as he approached, and he stepped through without looking back. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Many representatives had expected drama, threats, or at least some kind of reaction. Instead, they had received nothing but quiet acceptance. Chancellor Grex tried to restart the celebration, calling for traditional songs of unity and cooperation. But the mood had changed. The easy certainty of moments before had been replaced by something else. As the various delegations began to file out and return to their ships, many found themselves wondering why the human response had been so unsettling. After all, they had gotten exactly what they wanted. The humans were leaving. Captain Minji stood on the bridge of the cargo ship Steady Horizon, watching the last containers being loaded through the view screen. The Kelani Research Station orbited a beautiful blue-green planet, its white halls gleaming in the systems. Twin suns. She had visited this place many times over the past 5 years, bringing supplies and taking away the fruits of joint scientific research. Today was different. Today she was taking everything away. Final container secured, Captain, reported her first officer, Lieutenant Jing Ho. All human personnel are aboard. Station systems are being shut down now. Through the communication system, Minji could hear the voices of her crew coordinating the evacuation. Dr. Youngsik was supervising the removal of laboratory equipment from the biological research section. Engineer Kyungmin was carefully dismantling the improved power systems that human technicians had installed over the years. Captain, came Dr. Youngsik's voice over the com. The Kelani scientists are asking if we can leave some of the medical equipment. They say it belongs to the Joint Research Project. Minji activated her microphone. Check the contracts, Doctor. What does the paperwork say? There was a pause, then Youngsik's voice returned. According to the agreements, all equipment purchased with Human Federation funds belongs to the Federation. All research data generated using human resources is human property. Then we take it all, Minji said simply. We honor our contracts exactly as written. She could hear the frustration in the Kalani voices in the background, but there was nothing they could do. Every piece of equipment, every research file, every improvement made to the station over the years had been carefully documented. The humans had always been thorough with their record-keeping. 3 hours later, the steady horizon pulled away from the station. Behind them, the once bustling research facility was now an empty shell. The Kalani had expected to inherit a fully functional scientific outpost. Instead, they found bare walls and basic life support systems. Admiral Thrain arrived at the station 2 days after the humans departed. His massive form barely fit through the corridors as he inspected what remained. His aide, Commander Vex, followed behind with a datapad, documenting the damage. They took everything, Vex reported, his voice filled with disbelief. The advanced computers, the improved medical bay, even the better lighting systems. They stripped out every upgrade they had made. Thrain's 4 eyes burned with anger as he examined the empty laboratory spaces. This is sabotage. They have crippled the station out of spite. Sir, Vex said carefully, our legal team has reviewed their actions. They removed only equipment that belonged to the Human Federation according to the signed agreements. They left everything that was originally ours? The Admiral's claws scraped against the metal walls. Then why does this place feel so empty? The answer was simple, though neither Kalani officer understood it yet. The humans had not just brought equipment to the station. They had brought expertise, efficiency, and innovation. The Kalani scientists who remained were competent, but they had grown dependent on their human colleagues' insights and problem-solving abilities. Dr. Youngsik was already on another ship, heading to the Vorthak Healing Center on Nexus Prime. He moved through his laboratory there with the same calm efficiency he had shown at the Kalani station. His research into cellular regeneration had made him famous throughout the galaxy, and the Vorthak had paid enormous sums to have him work on their homeworld's medical problems. Doctor, his Vorthak assistant, researcher Keth, approached nervously. You cannot take the regeneration data. This research belongs to all species. It could save millions of lives. Youngsik paused in his packing. He had worked for 12 years to develop the treatments that could heal wounds that had previously been permanent. The Vorthak government had hoped to use his discoveries to help their aging leadership live longer, healthier lives. The research belongs to Earth, Youngsik said quietly. I developed it using Earth resources, Earth funding, and Earth time. The Vorthak Healing Center was simply the location where I worked. But the greater good, Keth began. The greater good, Youngsik interrupted, was considered when the Galactic Council voted. They decided that humans should not be involved in sensitive research. I am honoring their decision. He finished packing his personal items and activated a command on his workstation. Decades of research data began deleting itself from the shared computer systems. Treatment protocols, experimental results, and breakthrough discoveries all vanished. From the databases. Keth watched in horror as years of work disappeared. You are condemning people to death. I'm following galactic law, Youngsik replied. Resolution 847 Alpha prohibits human involvement in sensitive operations. Medical research certainly qualifies as sensitive. Within weeks, similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Human traders quietly completed their existing contracts and then stopped accepting new ones. Human engineers finished their current projects and declined to start others. Human doctors treated their patients until their contracts expired, then packed their medical bags and left. Dr. Haniel commanded a transport ship carrying 300 human families away from the mixed colony on Keth Prime. The colony had been one of the great success stories of galactic cooperation, with humans, Pilari, Threnel, and others living and working together in harmony. Captain, her communications officer reported, we are receiving requests from the colonial government. They want to renegotiate. They say they need human expertise to keep the terraforming systems running. Haniel looked at the planet shrinking. Behind them, beautiful cities dotted the landscape, connected by transport systems that human engineers had designed. Farms and forests covered areas that had been barren rock just 50 years ago, transformed by human agricultural techniques. Tell them we appreciate the offer, she said, but the Terran Federation is implementing new policies. We will no longer be placing citizens in colonies where they might be seen as a threat to local populations. The colonial government's desperation was clear in their next message. Captain, please, the humans on Keth Prime are not threats. They are our friends, our neighbors, their children were born here. I understand, Haniel replied. But the Galactic Council has spoken. They believe human presence creates instability. We do not wish to cause problems. Engineer Sunho was one of the last humans to leave Kalani space. For 15 years, he had maintained the fleet's most advanced warships, upgrading their systems and training their crews. His reputation as a miracle worker with complex technology had made him valuable beyond measure. Now he stood in the docking bay of the mighty warship Dominator, saying goodbye to the Kalani officers he had worked with for so long. This is madness, declared Chief Engineer Tor, his scaled face showing genuine emotion. You know these ships better than we do. How will we maintain them without you? Sunho handed over a datapad containing technical manuals and maintenance schedules. Everything you need is documented. Your people are skilled. You will adapt. But what about the modifications you made? The targeting improvements, the power distribution upgrades? The manuals do not explain how those work. Then you will have to figure them out, Sunho said with a slight smile. I am confident in Kalani intelligence and determination. Commander Tor's expression darkened. This is revenge. You are punishing us for the Council's decision. No, Sunho replied, picking up his personal toolbox. Revenge would be sabotaging your systems or providing false information. I am simply leaving as requested. The galaxy has decided it does not need human involvement in military operations. I am honoring that decision. As his shuttle pulled away from the Dominator, Sunho watched the great warship through the small porthole. It looked the same from the outside, but he knew the truth. Without constant human maintenance and innovation, the ship's advanced systems would slowly degrade. Parts would fail and not be properly replaced. Efficiency would decrease. Problems would accumulate. The same thing was happening throughout the galaxy. Trade routes that had run smoothly for decades began experiencing delays as human coordinators vanished. Research projects ground to a halt as human scientists took their expertise with them. Medical facilities struggled to maintain standards of care without human doctors and their innovative treatments, but the humans said nothing about these growing problems. They simply continued their quiet withdrawal, honoring every contract and legal obligation while carefully removing themselves from the galactic community on Earth. President Soman met with her advisors to discuss the evacuation progress. The reports were encouraging. Nearly 70% of human citizens had already returned to Federation space. The rest would be home within 6 months. What about resistance? Asked Defense Secretary Taeyun. Are any humans refusing to leave? Some are reluctant, admitted Foreign Minister Haijin, but none are refusing. They understand the situation. The galaxy has made its choice clear, President Soman nodded. And our new policies? All implemented, Haijin confirmed. No new trade. Agreements with non-human species. No new research partnerships. No new colonies outside Federation space. We are becoming exactly what the Council asked for contained. Good, the President said quietly. Let us see how long their certainty lasts. The first sign of trouble came 2 years after the humans left. Admiral Thrain stood on the bridge of his flagship, the mighty Dominator, watching his weapons officers struggle with the targeting computers. What should have been a simple training exercise had turned into a nightmare of malfunctioning systems and confused technicians. "Status report," Thrain demanded. His forearms crossed behind his back in a gesture of barely controlled frustration. Chief Engineer Tor approached nervously, his scaled face showing stress. "Sir, the primary targeting system is experiencing cascade failures. The backup systems are online, but they are operating at only 60% efficiency. What is the cause?" Thrain asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Unknown. Sir, the human engineer Sunho modified these systems extensively over the past 15 years. Our technicians understand the basic operations, but the advanced algorithms he created are ... complex." Thrain's claws scraped against the metal railing. The modifications Sunho had made to the Dominator's weapons had increased their accuracy by 40% and their firing rate by 25%. The ship had been the most advanced warship in the Kelani fleet, perhaps in the entire galaxy. Now it was limping along with systems that no one fully understood. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "we are receiving a priority message from Fleet Command. 3 more ships have reported similar problems with their modified systems." The Admiral closed his eyes. Half of his fleet had been upgraded by human engineers over the years. The humans had been so helpful, so eager to share their expertise. They had made the Kelani military stronger than it had ever been. That strength was now crumbling. "Sir," suggested Commander Vex, "perhaps we could contact the human engineer. Surely he would help us with this emergency." Thrain considered this for a moment. His pride warred with his practical need to maintain his fleet's readiness. Finally, he nodded, "Make the contact." An hour later, the face of Engineer Sunho appeared on the main screen. He looked older than Thrain remembered, with gray touching his black hair. He was sitting in what appeared to be a simple office with no military insignia or fancy equipment visible. "Admiral Thrain," Sunho said politely, "how may I help you?" "Our weapon systems are failing," Thrain said bluntly. "The modifications you made are experiencing problems that our technicians cannot solve. We need your assistance." Sunho's expression remained neutral. "I see. What specific problems are you experiencing?" Thrain described the cascade failures, the reduced efficiency, and the growing list of malfunctions. Sunho listened carefully, occasionally asking technical questions that revealed his deep understanding of the systems involved. "I can diagnose the problem remotely," Sunho offered. "If you provide me with access to your ship's diagnostic systems, I should be able to identify the root cause." Relief flooded through Thrain. "Excellent. Commander Vex, provide Engineer Sunho with the access codes," but Sunho held up his hand. "Before we proceed, Admiral, I must clarify something. Resolution 847 Alpha specifically prohibits human involvement in non-human military operations. Providing technical assistance to Kelani warships would violate galactic law." The bridge fell silent. Thrain's eyes narrowed as he processed this statement. "You are refusing to help us?" "I am not refusing," Sunho replied calmly. "I am simply pointing out that the Galactic Council has forbidden this type of cooperation." "I would not want to violate the law. This is an emergency situation," Thrain growled. "Surely the law allows for exceptions in critical circumstances." "I have reviewed Resolution 847 Alpha extensively," Sunho said. "It contains no provisions for emergency exceptions. The language is quite clear: no human involvement in military operations." Thrain's anger flared. "This is sabotage. You deliberately created systems that would fail without your presence." For the first time, Sunho's neutral expression shifted slightly, not to anger, but to something that might have been sadness. "Admiral, I created those systems to the best of my ability, using the most advanced techniques available. They were designed to operate for decades with proper maintenance. Your technicians are skilled people. They will eventually understand how the systems work." "Eventually is not good enough," Thrain snarled. "We need solutions now." Then I suggest you contact the Galactic Council, Sunho replied. Perhaps they can modify Resolution 847 Alpha to allow for emergency technical assistance. Until then, I am bound by galactic law. The communication link closed, leaving Thrain staring at a blank screen. On the other side of the galaxy, Chancellor Grex faced his own crisis. He sat in his private chambers on Nexus Prime, feeling older and more fragile than ever before. The rare blood condition that had afflicted him for decades was acting up again, causing weakness and pain throughout his four-armed body. Where is Dr. Hyarin? He asked his aide, a young Vorthic named Pell. Sir, Dr. Hyarin returned to human space 18 months ago. As required by Resolution 847 Alpha, the human medical staff was classified as sensitive personnel. And her replacement? Pell's face showed worry. Dr. Keth is highly qualified, sir. He studied under Dr. Hyarin for several years. But he admits that he does not fully understand the treatment protocol she developed for your condition. Grex's pain flared and he gripped the arm of his chair. Dr. Hyarin had been treating him for 20 years. When other doctors had given up hope, she had developed a complex treatment that had not only stabilized his condition but actually improved his health. Now that treatment was failing, and no one seemed to know how to fix it. Contact her, Grex ordered. Offer whatever payment she requires. This is a medical emergency. Sir, we have tried. The Human Federation's medical board reviewed the request and denied it. They cited Resolution 847 Alpha as the reason. Apparently, treating high-ranking government officials is considered sensitive work that could influence political decisions. Grex closed his eyes and tried to breathe through the pain. The irony was not lost on him. He had been one of the strongest supporters of the human containment protocol. He had argued that human involvement in sensitive positions was dangerous to galactic security. Now his own life depended on that involvement, and it was no longer available. Across the station, other problems were emerging. The Great Trade Hub. That was Nexus Prime was experiencing delays and inefficiencies that no one could quite explain. Ships arrived late, cargo was mislabeled, and communication errors seemed to plague every transaction. Trade Minister Cole stood in the central monitoring station, watching displays that showed the station's commercial activities. The numbers were troubling. Trade volume is down 12% from last year, reported his assistant. Average processing time has increased by 30%. Customer complaints have tripled. What is causing these problems? Cole demanded. His assistant looked uncomfortable. It is difficult to pinpoint, sir. Each individual problem seems minor. A miscommunication here, a delayed shipment there, a computer glitch in the processing systems. Cole was beginning to understand. Humans had worked throughout the station's commercial sectors. They had been clerks, coordinators, technicians, and managers. Most beings had barely noticed them. They simply did their jobs efficiently and quietly. Now they were gone, and the small efficiencies they had provided were gone with them. Sir, his assistant continued, several major trading companies have complained about the increased costs and delays. The Threnal Consortium is threatening to move their operations to other stations. Cole nodded grimly. The Threnal had been among the strongest supporters of the Human Containment Protocol, arguing that human competition was unfair to other species. Now they were discovering that human competition had actually helped keep costs low and services efficient. In the outer colonies, similar problems were emerging. On mining worlds where human geologists had mapped or deposits, production was declining as older surveys proved inadequate. Agricultural colonies were struggling with crop failures as human developed. Farming techniques were abandoned for traditional methods that were less suited to alien environments. The Zalthari Empire, which controlled dozens of star systems, began experiencing communication breakdowns. For generations, human technicians had maintained and upgraded their quantum communication networks. The systems were incredibly complex, requiring constant fine-tuning and adjustment. Without human expertise, the networks began to degrade. Messages were delayed, garbled, or lost entirely. What had once been a perfectly coordinated empire began to fragment as different regions lost touch with the central government. Ambassador Jiwoo of the Polari observed these developments with growing concern. Her people had been the only major species to abstain from the vote on Resolution 847 Alpha, and now she was beginning to understand why her instincts had been correct. She requested a meeting with the remaining human diplomatic staff on Nexus Prime, but was told that the human embassy had been closed. All diplomatic personnel had returned to Earth. As required by the resolution, instead she sent a message to Earth directly, requesting a meeting with any human representative who might be willing to discuss the growing problems in the galaxy. The response came from Ambassador Do-yun, the same calm man who had acknowledged the Council's decision 2 years earlier. Ambassador Jiwoo, his message began, the Terran Federation appreciates your concern. 5 years had passed since the Human Containment Protocol became law, and the galaxy was learning to live with its consequences. What had started as minor inconveniences were now major problems that affected every aspect of interstellar civilization. The Threnal Consortium's bankruptcy announcement sent shockwaves through the galactic economy. The spider-like beings had been among the richest trading companies in known space, controlling mining operations on hundreds of worlds. Now their CEO, a massive creature called Vex, stood before his company's board members and explained how their empire had crumbled. The extraction equipment on Kepler 442b stopped working 6 months ago. Vex reported, his multiple eyes reflecting the harsh lights of the boardroom. Our engineers cannot repair it. The systems were designed and maintained by human technicians. For over 30 years. Board member Klex clicked his mandibles nervously. What about the technical manuals? Surely the humans left documentation. They did, Vex confirmed. Volumes of it. But the manuals assume knowledge that our people simply do not possess. The humans learned our systems over decades of hands-on experience. They understood not just how the equipment worked, but why. It worked. Another board member, Vex, spoke up. Have we tried hiring human consultants? Surely some would work for sufficient payment. Vex's body language showed frustration. We have made numerous offers. The human response is always the same resolution. 847 Alpha prohibits their involvement in non-human industrial operations. They claim that mining technology could have military applications. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Without the Kepler 442b mines, the consortium had lost 60% of their rare mineral production. Other mining operations were failing as well as equipment designed by humans broke down and could not be repaired. We have no choice, Vex announced. The consortium will cease operations within the next standard year. All assets will be liquidated to pay our debts. Nexus Prime Ambassador Jiwoo received a visitor in her small office. The Polari Embassy was one of the few that still maintained a presence on the Great Station, though the number of diplomats had been reduced as the galaxy's political situation deteriorated. Her visitor was Ambassador Do-yun, the same human who had calmly acknowledged the Council's decision 5 years earlier. He looked older now, with gray in his hair and lines around his eyes, but his manner was still calm and professional. Ambassador Jiwoo, he said as he settled into a chair designed for much larger beings, I received your message requesting a meeting. I hope you understand that this visit is unofficial. The Terran Federation no longer maintains diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council. Wu studied his face carefully. Thank you for coming. I wanted to speak with you about the growing problems throughout the galaxy. What problems? Do-yun asked, though his tone suggested he knew exactly what she meant. The trade disruptions, the equipment failures, the communication breakdowns. Systems that worked perfectly for decades are falling apart. And they all seem to have one thing in common: they were maintained by humans. Do-yun nodded slowly. I have heard reports of various difficulties. It is unfortunate that these issues are occurring. Is it really unfortunate? Jiwoo asked directly. Or is it expected? For the first time, Do-yun's neutral expression shifted slightly. Ambassador Jiwoo, are you suggesting that humans somehow sabotaged galactic infrastructure before departing? No, she replied. I am suggesting something much more troubling. I think your people were more deeply integrated into our civilization than anyone realized. When you left, you took expertise and knowledge that cannot be easily replaced. Do-yan was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window at the busy space lanes around Nexus Prime. Even from their high vantage point, they could see that traffic was lighter than it had been years before. "Tell me," he said finally, "what do you see when you look at human involvement in galactic affairs?" "I see people who were everywhere," Jiwoo replied. "In every profession, every industry, every level of society. But you were so quiet about it that no one noticed how essential you had become." "We never tried to become essential," Do-yan said. "We simply went where we were invited and did the jobs we were asked to do." "But you did those jobs very well. Better than most species expected. Over time, you became the ones people turned to when they needed problems solved." Do-yan stood and walked to the window. 300 years ago, when humans first made contact with galactic civilization, we were the newcomers. We had to prove ourselves worthy of inclusion. So we worked harder, learned faster, and accepted assignments that others found difficult or unpleasant. "And now that work ethic is gone," Jiwoo observed. "Now that work ethic is contained within human space, as the galaxy requested." Jiwoo joined him at the window. "What will happen to us?" "You will adapt," Do-yan replied. "All species are capable of learning and growth. The galaxy existed before humans arrived, and it will continue to exist now that we have left. But at what cost?" Do-yan did not answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than before. "That is not for humans to determine. The galaxy made its choice. Now it must live with the consequences." On the other side of the station, Chancellor Grex was making his own difficult choices. His health had continued to deteriorate without Dr. Hyarin's specialized care. The Vorthek doctors had tried their best to replicate her treatments, but they lacked her deep understanding of human medical techniques. "Sir," his aide Pell reported, "the medical board has recommended a new course of treatment. It is less effective than Dr. Hyarin's methods, but it should slow the progression of your condition." Grex looked older than his years, his blue skin pale and his forearms trembling slightly. "How much less effective?" "The new treatment might extend your life by 10 years, possibly 15. Dr. Hyarin's treatment could have given you 30 years or more." The irony was bitter. Grex had argued passionately that human involvement in sensitive positions was dangerous. Now his own life was being shortened by the absence of that involvement. "Sir," Pell continued carefully, "there may be another option. The medical board could declare this a special humanitarian case. They could request an exception to Resolution 847 Alpha." Grex considered this for a moment. It would be embarrassing to admit that he needed human help, especially after being such a strong supporter of the human containment protocol, but it might save his life. "No," he said finally, "I will not undermine the law I helped create. If, the humans are too dangerous to be involved in sensitive positions, then I must accept the consequences of that decision." Pell looked surprised. "Sir, are you certain?" "I am certain," Grex replied. "To do otherwise would be to admit that the entire council was wrong about the human threat. And if we were wrong about that, what else might we have been wrong about?" It was a question that more and more beings throughout the galaxy were asking themselves. The Zelthari Empire was fracturing as communication systems continued to fail. Regional governors who had once coordinated smoothly with the central government now operated independently. Unable to maintain reliable contact with the capital world, Emperor Zeth stood in his throne room, reviewing reports from across his domain. What he read was deeply troubling. "The outer colonies have stopped sending tax payments," reported his treasury minister. "They claim they never received the collection orders." "What about the defense fleet?" Zeth asked. "Are they maintaining patrol schedules?" "Communication with the fleet is sporadic at best, Your Majesty. Some ships report for duty, others do not. The coordination that once made our military strong has broken down." Zeth's snake-like head swayed as he processed this information. How is this possible? We have ruled this empire for over 200 years. Your Majesty, the minister said carefully, our investigation has revealed that human technicians maintained our communication networks for the past 80 years. They made improvements and modifications that our own people did not fully understand. And now those people are gone, yes, Your Majesty. And their knowledge went with them. Emperor Zeth stared at the vast star map that dominated one wall of his throne room. For generations, that map had shown a unified empire spanning dozens of systems. Now it might as well show dozens of independent worlds, each cut off from the others by failing technology. Send messages to all regional governors, he ordered. Use whatever communication methods still work. Tell them that the empire will adapt to these temporary difficulties. But even as he gave the order, Zeth wondered if the empire would survive. At all, Dr. Youngha tended her garden on the human colony of New Seoul, listening to the galactic news broadcasts while she worked among her tomatoes and peppers. The reports were troubling but not surprising. She had spent 40 years as one of the galaxy's leading epidemiologists, working with dozens of species to understand and combat diseases that threatened entire populations. Her research had saved millions of lives and prevented several potential pandemics. Now, according to the latest reports, a plague was spreading through Vorthak space. The disease was not particularly dangerous. She had dealt with similar outbreaks before. But without human medical expertise, the Vorthak doctors were struggling to contain it. Her former colleague, Dr. Keth, appeared on the news broadcast, looking exhausted and 8 years after the human containment protocol became law, the galaxy watched in horror as the Zelthari Empire collapsed into civil war. What began as a simple communication failure during a diplomatic summit escalated into the bloodiest conflict. The galaxy had seen in centuries. Emperor Zeth had been meeting with the governors of his outer provinces to discuss the growing problems with interstellar coordination. The meeting was meant to restore unity to an empire that was slowly falling apart as communication systems continued to fail. The crisis began when Governor Vash of the Outer Rim received a garbled transmission during a crucial moment in the negotiations. The message, which should have been a proposal for increased local autonomy, was corrupted by the failing quantum communication network. Instead, it appeared to be an order for Vash to surrender his military forces to Imperial control. This is an insult, Vash declared, his serpentine form coiling with anger. We have served the Empire faithfully for generations, and now you treat us like rebels. Emperor Zeth stared at him in confusion. Governor Vash, I made no such demand. The proposal clearly states that local forces would remain under provincial command. But when they checked the communication logs, the technical staff discovered that the message Vash had received was completely different from what Zeth had sent. The quantum encryption algorithms that protected Imperial communications had been slowly degrading without human maintenance, causing random errors in transmission. This is sabotage, accused Governor Kren of the Inner Systems. Someone is deliberately corrupting our communications to cause conflict. Yes, agreed Vash, but who and why would they want to destroy the Empire? Suspicion and paranoia spread through the conference as each governor wondered if the messages they had received over the past months had been accurate. How many misunderstandings had been caused by corrupted communications? How many conflicts could have been avoided if the networks had functioned properly? The situation spiraled out of control when Governor Vash returned to his home system and discovered that his defense fleet had already received orders to attack Imperial installations. The orders appeared to come from the Emperor himself, commanding immediate action against traitorous elements in the Outer Rim. Emperor Zeth had sent no such orders. But by the time the truth was discovered, Vash's forces had already fired on an Imperial patrol ship, killing hundreds of loyal soldiers within days. The Empire was at war with itself. Captain Haniel watched the destruction from her patrol ship at the edge of human space. The Zelthari fleets, once disciplined and coordinated, now tore at each other like wild animals. Ships that had served together for decades turned their weapons on former comrades, each side believing they were fighting to preserve the Empire. Captain, reported her communications officer, Lieutenant Taeyun. We are receiving distress calls from 17 Zelthari vessels. They are requesting immediate assistance with medical evacuations and technical repairs. Haniel studied the tactical display showing the battle raging in the distance. She could see crippled ships drifting helplessly, their crews dying while perfectly functional human vessels sat nearby. What is our response? Taeyun asked. Relay their requests to any non-human vessels in the area, Haniel replied, her voice heavy with sadness. Resolution 847 Alpha prohibits our involvement in military conflicts. Captain, the Zelthari Dawn is reporting total life support failure. They have over 3,000 crew members aboard, including civilians. Haniel closed her eyes for a moment. During the height of galactic cooperation, human rescue ships would have been first to respond to such emergencies. Human medical teams were considered among the best in the galaxy at treating trauma injuries and managing life support emergencies. Now they could only watch. Are there any other ships in range? She asked. The Kelani cruiser Valor is 12 hours away. The Threnal transport Prophet's Edge could reach them in 15 hours. Relay the information to both ships. But Haniel knew it would be too late. The Zelthari Dawn would be a tomb long before help arrived. Lieutenant Taeyun looked up from his console. Captain, personal message from the Dawn. Commander Zex is requesting to speak with you directly. Put him through. The screen flickered to life, showing a Zelthari officer whose scaled face was streaked with burns and blood. Behind him, smoke and emergency lights painted a scene of desperate chaos. Captain Haniel, Zex gasped, my ship is dying. My people are dying. You have the power to save us. Please, I beg you. Commander, Haniel replied quietly, I cannot legally provide assistance. The Galactic Council has forbidden human involvement in military operations. This is not military, Zex shouted, his voice breaking. This is humanitarian. These are civilians, children, elderly, non-combatants. The law does not distinguish between military and civilian casualties in combat zones, Haniel explained. Any assistance would be considered military involvement. Zex stared at her in disbelief. You are condemning 3,000 innocent people to death over a technicality? I'm following the law that your government helped create, Haniel said. 8 years ago, the Zelthari Empire voted in favor of Resolution 847 Alpha, your people. Decided that human involvement in sensitive situations was too dangerous to allow. We were wrong, Zex whispered. We were all wrong. Please, Captain, show mercy. Haniel felt tears in her eyes, but her voice remained steady. I am showing mercy. Commander, I am honoring your Empire's clearly expressed wishes by staying out of your affairs. The transmission ended as the Zelthari Dawn's power systems finally failed on Nexus Prime. Chancellor Grex faced riots in the corridors outside his office. Trade guilds, angry over the economic collapse that was spreading throughout the galaxy, demanded action to restore stability. The great station itself was showing signs of the decay that plagued galactic civilization. Power fluctuations caused lights to flicker randomly. The air recycling systems produced strange smells and occasional choking clouds of contaminated atmosphere. Computer networks crashed without warning, losing years of important data. Sir, reported his aide Pell, the station's chief engineer is requesting an emergency meeting. He says the main power core is becoming unstable. Grex looked older than ever, his blue skin pale and mottled with the marks of his advancing illness. Without Dr. Hiren's treatments, his condition had steadily worsened. He would be lucky to live another year. What does he need? Grex asked. Human technical assistance, sir. The power core was designed by human engineers 50 years ago. Our people can operate it, but they do not understand how to repair the advanced systems. The irony was crushing. Nexus Prime, the symbol of galactic unity and cooperation, was literally falling apart without human expertise. The station that had hosted the vote to exclude humans from galactic society now desperately needed those same humans to survive. Sir, Pell continued, the engineer says that without proper repairs, the power core could fail completely within 6 months. That would make the station uninhabitable. Grex closed his eyes and tried to think through the fog of pain that constantly clouded his mind. Have we tried to hire human consultants? Yes, sir. The Human Federation's response was that station maintenance could be considered a sensitive security operation under Resolution 847 Alpha. They declined to provide assistance. Of course they did, Grex muttered. We wrote the law too broadly. We wanted to exclude them from everything, so we made everything a security concern. He struggled to his feet and walked to the window that looked out over the station's central plaza. Below, he could see protesters carrying signs demanding solutions to problems that seemed to have no solutions. Sir, Pell said carefully, there may be one option. We could call for a vote to modify or repeal Resolution 847 Alpha. If the Council agrees that human assistance is necessary, the Council? Grex laughed bitterly. Half the Council members cannot even reach Nexus Prime because their ships are breaking down. The Threnal Consortium is bankrupt. The Zelthari Empire is at war with itself. The Kelani military can barely maintain order in their own territory. He turned back to his aide. How many Council members are still able to participate in governmental functions? Pell consulted his datapad. Perhaps 200, sir. Maybe fewer. Many species are dealing with internal crises that prevent them from engaging in galactic politics. 200 out of the original 1,000, Grex mused. And how many of those would be willing to admit that they made a mistake 8 years ago? The question hung in the air without an answer. On the distant world of New Sol, Dr. Youngha continued to tend her garden while monitoring the galactic news feeds. The reports grew worse each day. Plague spread unchecked through multiple systems. Industrial accidents claimed thousands of lives as safety systems failed without proper maintenance. Pirates and raiders grew bold as military forces struggled with equipment failures and communication breakdowns. Her former colleague, Dr. Keth, appeared regularly on the news broadcasts, looking more desperate with each appearance. The plague in Vorthak space had spread to 12 systems and was now approaching the borders of Kelani territory. We have identified the pathogen, Keth announced in his latest broadcast, but we cannot develop an effective treatment. We lack the expertise in human medical techniques that would be necessary to combat this disease. 12 years had passed since the Human Containment Protocol became law, and the galaxy that had once voted so confidently to exclude humanity was barely recognizable. What had been a thriving interstellar civilization was now a collection of struggling survivor enclaves, each fighting their own battles against the cascade of failures that seemed to have no end. Admiral Thrain stood on the bridge of his last remaining functional warship, the cruiser Defiance, watching in stunned disbelief. As raiders destroyed another civilian transport, the attackers flew ships that had once belonged to the Kelani military, vessels that had been decommissioned and sold for scrap when they became too difficult to maintain without human engineers. Now those same ships, restored with black market parts and operated by desperate criminals, were more advanced than anything in Thrain's current fleet. Admiral, reported his tactical officer, Commander Vex, the Raider flagship is hailing us. They are demanding our surrender. Thrain's 4 eyes burned with humiliation. The Raiders were using human-designed targeting systems that his own technicians had never fully understood. The weapons on their ships fired with precision that his current crews could not match. Even their communications equipment was superior to what the official Kelani military could field. Open the channel. Thrain ordered. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to a Kelani warrior named Krex, a former military officer who had been discharged years earlier for insubordination. His scarred features showed the confidence of someone who held all the advantages. Admiral Thrain, Krex said mockingly, the great defender of Kelani honor. Look how far you have fallen. Your mighty fleet reduced to a single outdated cruiser. What do you want, traitor? Thrain snarled. What I want is irrelevant. What I have is power. My ships work, Admiral. My weapons function properly. My crews know how to maintain systems that your people have forgotten how to operate. The truth of those words cut deep. Krex's raiders had recruited former human technicians who had been willing to sell their expertise for enormous payments. While the official military struggled with failing equipment, the criminals had access to the knowledge they needed to keep their ships running. "You serve outlaws and pirates," Thrain accused. "You have abandoned your honor." "I serve those who pay me well," Krex replied. "The Kelani government can barely afford to fuel its remaining ships. The raiders offer me wealth, functional equipment, and the chance to use my skills. Tell me, Admiral, what does your honor offer you in return?" Thrain had no answer. His honor had brought him nothing but a crumbling fleet and the impossible task of defending a homeworld with inadequate resources. "Surrender now," Krex continued, "and I will allow your crew to live. Refuse, and I will demonstrate the superiority of properly maintained human technology." The communication ended, leaving Thrain alone with his impossible choices on the distant world of New Sol. Dr. Youngha had grown old tending her garden and watching the galaxy tear itself apart. She was 73 now, her black hair silver and her hands marked by decades of soil and sunshine. But her mind remained sharp, and she understood better than most what was happening to galactic civilization. The news feeds that day carried reports of the plague that continued to ravage Vorthic space. Dr. Keth, now elderly himself, made what he announced would be his final broadcast to the galaxy. "After 12 years of fighting this disease," he said, his voice weak with exhaustion, "we must accept defeat. The plague has spread to 47 systems and claimed over 2 billion lives. We lack the medical knowledge necessary to develop effective treatments." Keth's face showed the weight of failure and desperation. "The cure exists. We know it exists because similar diseases have been defeated before, using human medical techniques that we do not fully understand. But those techniques are forbidden to us by our own laws." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "Dr. Youngha, if you are watching this broadcast, please know that I do not blame you for our suffering. You offered to help us many times over the years. It was we who refused your assistance in the name of galactic security. The irony is that our security was never threatened by human knowledge. It was threatened by our own ignorance, our own fear, and our own pride." Dr. Youngha turned off the broadcast and walked to her greenhouse, where she kept the medical equipment she had brought from her old laboratory. The samples and research data she had accumulated over her career could save the Vortex civilization. Within months, but Resolution 847 Alpha still classified her as sensitive personnel, too dangerous to be involved in galactic health issues. She would tend her tomatoes and let billions die, because that was what the galaxy had asked her to do. Meanwhile, Chancellor Grex faced his own final crisis. Nexus Prime, the great symbol of galactic unity, was dying around him. The power core instabilities had worsened to the point where entire sections of the station were losing life support. The population, once numbering in the millions, had dropped to fewer than 50,000 as beings fled to their homeworlds. Those who remained were trapped. The transport systems were failing, and few ships were willing to risk docking with a station that might explode at any moment. "Sir," reported Pell, now showing the gray of advanced age, "the engineering team has given us their final assessment. Complete power core failure is inevitable within the next 6 months. After that, the station will be uninhabitable." Grex nodded weakly from his bed in the medical bay. His condition had deteriorated to the point where he could no longer stand. Without assistance, the treatments that might have saved him were locked away in human space, forbidden by laws he had helped write. "What about evacuation?" he asked. "We have transport capacity for perhaps 20,000 beings, sir. The rest will have to hope that rescue ships arrive before the final failure." "And the probability of that?" Pell was quiet for a moment. "Low. Sir, most spacefaring civilizations are dealing with their own crises. Few have functional fleets capable of mounting large-scale rescue operations." Grex closed his eyes and tried to imagine the headlines that would follow. "Nexus Prime abandoned. Symbol of galactic unity dies in space. Council members trapped as station fails." The greatest irony was that human engineering teams could probably repair the power core within weeks. The same people who had been excluded from galactic society as too dangerous, were the only ones capable of preventing this disaster. Sir, Pell said carefully, there is one final option. We could transmit an emergency request directly to Earth, not through official channels, but as a humanitarian appeal from dying beings to anyone willing to help. No, Grex said firmly. I will not beg for assistance from the people I spent years condemning as threats to galactic security. Sir, your pride will not keep this station functioning. My pride is all I have left, Grex replied. If I abandon it now, then I must admit that everything I believed, everything I fought for, was wrong. Pell leaned closer to his old friend. And leader, sir, what if it was wrong? What if we made a terrible mistake 12 years ago? Grex was quiet for a long time, staring at the ceiling of the medical bay. Finally, he spoke in a whisper. If we were wrong, Pell, then we have destroyed the greatest civilization in galactic history for no reason. We have condemned billions to death, caused wars, famines, and plagues, all because we were afraid of people who only wanted to help us. And if that is true, sir? If that is true, then we deserve whatever fate awaits us. In the depths of space, Captain Kyung-yi commanded a human exploration vessel as it conducted routine surveys along the borders of Federation space. Her crew was young and eager, born after the human containment protocol, raised in a galaxy where humanity was isolated from the broader community of species. Captain, reported her science officer, Lieutenant Ji-hoon, we are detecting massive energy signatures from the direction of former Kelani space. It appears to be weapons fire on a scale consistent with fleet actions. Kyung-yi studied the sensor. Readings. The energy patterns were familiar. They matched the signatures of human-designed weapons, systems that had been sold to various species before the isolation began. Any distress calls? She asked. Negative, sir. All communications from that region ceased several days ago. The implications were clear. Whatever conflict was raging in former Kelani space had grown beyond the ability of the participants to call for help. Entire fleets were being destroyed, entire populations were probably dying, and the human ships that might have made a difference were forbidden to intervene. Set course for the outer marker buoys, King-yi ordered. We will monitor the situation from maximum sensor range. Captain, asked Lieutenant Ji-hoon, why do we not offer assistance? Surely humanitarian concerns override political restrictions. Kyung-yi looked at her young officer with understanding. He had been born into a galaxy where humans were isolated, but he had not lived through the years when they were part of the galactic community. Lieutenant, 12 years ago the galaxy decided that human assistance was too dangerous to accept. They passed laws specifically designed to keep us away from their problems. We are honoring those laws. But people are dying, sir. People have been dying for 12 years, Lieutenant. Millions of them. Perhaps billions. And every death can be traced back to the galaxy's decision to exclude human expertise from their affairs. 15 years had passed since Resolution 847 Alpha was signed into galactic law, and Chancellor Grex found himself on a journey he had once sworn he would never make. The former leader of the Galactic Council sat in the cramped passenger compartment of a civilian transport, his once powerful frame now frail and bent with age and illness. The ship was Threnel-built, one of the few vessels still capable of making the long journey to Sol System. The Threnel Consortium had collapsed years ago, but some independent operators still maintained their vessels well enough for basic transport services. The journey would take 4 months, assuming the ship's failing systems held together. That long, sir, said his aide Pell, now gray-haired and showing his own signs of advanced age. Are you certain about this course of action? The council remnants could interpret this as treason. Grex laughed bitterly, the sound turning into a painful cough. What council, Pell? Half the member species have ceased to exist as functional governments. The other half are too busy fighting for survival to care what an old, dying politician does with his remaining time. Through the small porthole, Grex could see the stars streaming past as the ship traveled through hyperspace. Those same stars had once been connected by a vast network of trade routes, communication relays, and diplomatic relationships. Now they were increasingly isolated points of light in a dark and hostile galaxy. Besides, Grex continued, who exactly would I be betraying? The Zelthari Empire that no longer exists? The Kellani military that was destroyed by raiders? The Vorthek? Worlds that are dying from plague? Pell was quiet for a moment. What about your principles, sir? Your belief that human involvement was dangerous to galactic stability? My principles, Grex said slowly, led to the destruction of everything I claimed to be protecting. Perhaps it is time to admit that I was wrong. The admission came hard. To the old Chancellor. For 15 years, he had watched the galaxy crumble while refusing to acknowledge that the human containment protocol might have been a mistake. Pride and stubbornness had kept him from recognizing the truth that was obvious to anyone willing to see it. Humans had never been a threat to galactic civilization. They had been its foundation. The transport ship arrived at Terra after a difficult journey marked by system failures and emergency repairs. The crew had been forced to drop out of hyperspace twice to fix problems that would have been minor annoyances in the old days. When human technicians maintained the galactic fleet, now such problems were potentially fatal, as fewer and fewer beings possessed the knowledge to make complex repairs. Grex's first sight of Earth from orbit was both beautiful and humbling. The blue-green world looked peaceful and prosperous, with orbital installations that functioned smoothly and ships that moved with confident precision. The contrast with the rest of the galaxy was stark. Sir, Pell observed, their technology appears to have advanced significantly since we last had contact. Indeed, the human ships they could see were sleeker and more sophisticated than anything in the galaxy's records. 15 years of isolation had not slowed human innovation. If anything, it had accelerated it. The transport was directed to a civilian spaceport on Luna, where Grex and his small delegation were processed through customs with polite efficiency. The human officials were professional and courteous, but they showed no particular excitement about hosting the former Chancellor of the Galactic Council. To them, he was simply another visitor from a distant and troubled part of the galaxy. The journey to Earth took another day aboard a human passenger liner that was comfortable, clean, and remarkably advanced. Grex found himself studying every detail of the ship's operation, noting the smooth integration of systems and the quiet competence of the crew. This was what galactic transportation had once been like, before the cascade of failures had made interstellar travel dangerous and unreliable. They landed at a modest spaceport outside Geneva, where Grex was met by a small reception committee led by a human woman in simple business attire. Chancellor Grex, she said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting, I am Foreign Minister Haijin. President Soman is prepared to meet with you, though I should mention that this visit is unofficial. The Terran Federation does not currently recognize the authority of the Galactic Council. Grex accepted her handshake, noting the firm grip and direct gaze. I understand, Minister. I am grateful for any time the President can spare. The journey to the meeting site took them through the Swiss countryside, where Grex was surprised to see thriving cities and productive agricultural areas. He had expected to find a species struggling with isolation, perhaps bitter about their exclusion from galactic affairs. Instead, he found a civilization that had grown and prospered during its years of solitude. President Soman received him in a modest conference room overlooking Lake Geneva. The human leader was a woman in her 60s, with silver hair and the kind of calm confidence that came from competent leadership. She was accompanied by Ambassador Doyan, now elderly but still sharp-eyed and alert. Chancellor Grex, President Soman said as they settled around a simple wooden table, Ambassador Doyan tells me you have something important to discuss. Grex had rehearsed this moment during the long journey from what remained of galactic space. He had planned eloquent speeches about mutual cooperation and shared interests. But sitting across from these composed human leaders, all his prepared words seemed inadequate. Madam President, he began, his voice weaker than he would have liked. I have come to ask for your help. Help with what? She asked. Help with everything, Grex replied. The galaxy is falling apart. Civilizations that existed for thousands of years have collapsed into chaos. Billions of beings have died from diseases, wars, and accidents that could have been prevented. The systems that sustained interstellar society have broken down beyond our ability to repair them. President Soman listened without interruption, her expression neutral but attentive. We need human expertise, Grex continued. We need your doctors, your engineers, your diplomats. We need the knowledge and skills that we so foolishly rejected 15 years ago. I see, the president said quietly. And what are you offering? In return for this assistance? Grex had expected this question, but it still stung. We are prepared to rescind Resolution 847 Alpha completely. We will restore human citizenship rights throughout the galaxy. We will provide reparations for the economic losses your people suffered during the isolation period. We will grant humans positions of honor in the new galactic government, he continued desperately. Leadership roles, advisory positions, whatever you desire. The galaxy recognizes that it needs human involvement to survive. Ambassador Doyan spoke for the first time. Chancellor, you speak of we and the galaxy as if these entities still exist. But according to our intelligence reports, the Galactic Council has not met in over 3 years. Most member species are struggling to maintain basic governmental functions. The Pilari delegation still functions, Grex protested. Several other small species maintain contact. We could reconvene the council, pass new resolutions. With what authority? President Soman interrupted gently. The council's power came from the consent of its member species. If those species no longer exist as functional governments, what gives the council the right to speak for them? Grex felt his carefully planned arguments crumbling. Then what do you suggest? Should we simply let galactic civilization die? Chancellor, the president said, let me ask you a different question. Why should humanity risk its citizens' lives to solve problems that we were forbidden to prevent? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Grex found himself thinking of all the disasters that had occurred over the past 15 years, disasters that human expertise might have prevented or minimized. Because it is the right thing to do, he said finally. Because billions of innocent beings will die if humanity continues to stand aside. And where was this concern for innocent beings? 15 years ago? Ambassador Doyan asked quietly. When the council voted to exclude us from galactic society, did you consider the innocent humans who would lose their homes, their careers, their friends? That was different, Grex protested. We thought we were protecting galactic security. From what threat, exactly? President Soman asked. In 300 years of contact, what aggressive action did humanity ever take against another species? Grex struggled to answer. The truth was that humans had never threatened anyone. They had been model galactic citizens, contributing more than they took in solving more problems than they created. We were afraid, he admitted finally. You were so adaptable, so successful at everything you attempted. We thought that eventually you would dominate us all. So you decided to dominate? US first, Doyan observed. Yes, Grex said, his voice barely above a whisper. And we destroyed ourselves in the process. President Soman stood and walked to the window, looking out at the peaceful lake below. Chancellor, I appreciate that you have come here personally to make this request. I can see that it was not easy for you to admit these mistakes. But? Grex asked, sensing the rejection that was coming. But the Terran Federation finds no compelling reason to risk our citizens' welfare by re-engaging with galactic politics. The words hit Grex like a physical blow. You are condemning billions. 20 years had passed since Resolution 847 Alpha became galactic law, and the universe had become a very different place. Commander Kyung-yi stood on the bridge of the human relief ship Harmony, watching the Pilari refugee fleet drift through. Space like scattered leaves on a cosmic wind, the once great Galactic Council no longer existed. Nexus Prime was a cold, dark tomb floating in the void, its power core having failed 3 years earlier just as the engineers had predicted. The few survivors had been evacuated by Pilari ships in a desperate rescue mission that had saved lives, but could not save the symbol of galactic unity. Commander, reported her communications officer, Lieutenant Minho. We are receiving a transmission from the Polari flagship. Ambassador Jiwoo is requesting permission to come aboard. Kyung-hee nodded. Grant permission. Have her escorted to Conference Room Alpha? She had been expecting this contact. The Polari were the last remnant of the old Galactic Order, and their situation was becoming desperate. Their homeworld had been destroyed by a plague similar to the one that had ravaged Vortex space, and their refugee fleet was running low on supplies and hope. Ambassador Jiwoo looked much older than her years when she entered the conference room. The small, bird-like being had lost the bright energy that had once made her a formidable diplomatic presence. Now she moved with the careful steps of someone carrying an enormous burden. Commander Kyung-hee, she said, settling into a chair designed for her small frame. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Of course, Ambassador. How can we help you? Jiwoo's expression showed surprise at the directness of the offer. You are willing to help us? The Polari were the only species to abstain from the vote on Resolution 847 Alpha, Kyung-hee replied. You refuse to support a law based on fear rather than facts. The Terran Federation remembers its friends. Tears formed in Jiwoo's large eyes. We need sanctuary, Commander. Our fleet carries the last 3 million Polari in existence. Our ships are failing, our supplies are running low, and we have nowhere else to go. What happened to your homeworld? The plague, Jiwoo said simply. The same disease that destroyed the Vorthic worlds. It reached our system 18 months ago. We evacuated everyone we could, but she did not need to finish. Kyung-hee had read the reports. The plague that human doctors could have cured easily had killed billions because galactic law had forbidden human medical involvement. Where would you like to settle? Kyung-hee asked. We do not ask for an entire world, Jiwoo said quickly. Perhaps a small continent or even just a large island. We are a peaceful people. We would not be a burden. Kyung-hee smiled, the first genuine smile Jiwoo had seen in years. Ambassador, you underestimate your value. The Polari are known throughout human space as beings of integrity and wisdom. Any world would be honored to host your people. You would really accept us? More than accept you. We would welcome you as partners in building something better than what the galaxy has become. Jiwoo broke down then, 20 years of fear and desperation finally overwhelming her diplomatic composure. Kyung-hee waited patiently while the small ambassador composed herself. There is something else, Jiwoo said when she could speak again. Something you should know about what happened to the rest of the galaxy. Tell me. Chancellor Grex died 6 months ago, Jiwoo reported. He spent his last years trying to organize some kind of rescue effort for the surviving populations, but there was little he could do. Most species that still exist have reverted to pre-spaceflight technology levels. She paused, looking out at the stars visible through the conference room's viewport. He sent me a message before he died. He wanted me to tell any humans I met that he was sorry. He said that he finally understood what the galaxy had lost when it drove you away. Kyung-hee nodded solemnly. Grex was not an evil being. He was simply afraid, and fear made him make terrible choices. The Kelani are extinct, Jiwoo continued. The last of their worlds fell to raiders 2 years ago. The Zelthari Empire collapsed completely. Their former territory is now controlled by dozens of warring factions. The Threnal homeworld has descended into civil war over the remaining resources. And the Vorthak? Gone, all of them. The plague took their entire species within 5 years. The catalog of destruction was staggering. Civilizations that had existed for millennia had been wiped out by problems that human expertise could have solved. The galaxy's fear of human competence had led to the destruction of galactic civilization itself. What about the others? Kyung-hee asked. The smaller species, the ones who abstained or voted against the resolution? Most are gone, Jiwoo said. Sadly, a few have managed to maintain basic technology, but they are isolated and struggling. The infrastructure that connected the galaxy, the trade routes, communication networks, standardized currencies, all of it has collapsed. So the old galaxy is truly dead. Yes, and in its place there is only darkness and silence. They sat. quietly for a moment, contemplating the magnitude of what had been lost. Then Qian Li spoke again. Ambassador, would you be interested in helping us contact some of these surviving species? What do you mean? Humanity has spent 20 years developing new technologies and expanding our own civilization within Federation space. We have advanced far beyond where we were when the galaxy excluded us. Perhaps it is time to extend a hand to those who are genuinely interested in cooperation. Jiwu's eyes widened. You would consider re-engaging with galactic civilization? Not with the old civilization, Qian Yi clarified. That was built on fear and hierarchy and the belief that some species were naturally superior to others. But we might be interested in building something new with species that have learned the value of cooperation. Species like the Pilari. Exactly. Small groups of survivors who understand that diversity is strength, not weakness. Beings who have learned that exclusion and fear lead only to destruction. Jiwu leaned forward eagerly. What would this new civilization look like? I do not. No, King Yi admitted. That would be something we would build together, carefully and slowly. But it would be based on different principles than the old galaxy, mutual respect instead of hierarchy, cooperation instead of competition, inclusion instead of exclusion. The possibilities excited Jiwu in a way she had not felt in years. When could we begin? We already have begun, King Yi replied. By offering sanctuary to the Pilari refugees, we are taking the first step toward a new kind of interstellar community. 3 months later, the Pilari fleet arrived at Kepler 442c, a garden world that had been terraformed by human colonists 50 years earlier. The planet was beautiful, with rolling hills, clean rivers, and cities that functioned with the quiet efficiency that characterized human engineering. The colonists welcomed the Pilari refugees with warmth and genuine enthusiasm. Housing was prepared, jobs were offered, and integration programs were established to help the newcomers adapt to their new home. But most importantly, the Pilari were treated as equals and partners, not as grateful recipients of charity within a year. The first joint Pilari human research facility was established. The combination of Pilari analytical skills and human innovative thinking produced breakthroughs that neither species could have achieved alone. Word of the successful integration spread to other survivor groups scattered throughout what had once been galactic space. A few reached out tentatively, asking if they too might find sanctuary and partnership in the growing Human-Pilari alliance. Each request was evaluated carefully. Species with a history of cooperation and peaceful behavior were welcomed. Those that showed signs of the old hierarchical thinking or species, supremacist attitudes were politely declined. The new civilization grew slowly and carefully. Learning from the mistakes that had destroyed the old galaxy on a distant world at the edge of former Threnal space, an elderly being named Vash made his living as a scavenger, picking through the ruins of abandoned cities and selling whatever technology still functioned. He had once been a regional governor in the Zalthari Empire, commanding fleets and ruling star systems. Now he was alone, the last of his kind in this particular region of space. One day, while exploring the wreckage of a communications facility, he discovered an ancient message relay that was still partially functional. As he worked to extract valuable components, the device suddenly activated, playing a recorded message that had been cycling through the system for years. The voice was human, calm, professional, and somehow familiar. This is Ambassador Doyan of the Terran Federation, sending greetings to any beings who might receive this message. 20 years have passed since the galaxy chose fear over friendship, suspicion over cooperation. That galaxy is gone now, and we mourn its passing. Vash stopped his work, listening intently to words from a species he had helped vote into exile. But from the ashes of the old, something new can grow. The Human Federation and our partners are building a different kind of civilization, one based on mutual respect, voluntary cooperation, and the belief that diversity makes us stronger. If you are a survivor of the old galaxy's collapse, if you have learned the lessons that destruction should have taught, if you are ready to abandon the fear and hatred that led to so much suffering, then perhaps you would like to join us. The message provided coordinates for a small human settlement at the edge of K.